Welcome back to CS 232. Today we're going to be talking about methods. This is the last video for week 6. Just to give you kind of a quick preview of what we're talking about today, I've opened up Xamarin, and the thing I asked you to take a look at the other week was Tasky. Tasky's got a ton of different methods in it. Here's one, save item. That saves a particular item when you are saving tasks. Here's a get item that retrieves items. There's a delete item. So as you can see, methods are used all over the place in professional programs. Task Manager has a variety of them too, saving tasks, deleting tasks, getting tasks. Repository has a number of them. Even the screens have a number of them on Create versus on Resume, and a number of others. So methods are a way to take a chunk of code and put it into a reusable unit. We call this a method. We can write massive programs this way. For example, the code base of one of the games I most recently worked on, Batman Arkham Origins, was actually about 1.5 million lines of code. That probably would have been about 15 million, or maybe even more, if we wouldn't have used methods. The reason for that is because methods break things down so that you can use bits of code over and over again. It breaks them down into smaller, manageable pieces of code, and we can basically reuse these over and over. It's also known as the divide and conquer approach. In other words, you take a problem and you break it up into pieces. For example, if you think about things such as making a sandwich, one of the first things you do on any kind of sandwich you make might be to get the 2 pieces of bread. That is a shared thing between whether it's a turkey sandwich or a ham and cheese sandwich or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich or whatnot. The bread getting portion of that is exactly the same. So that is what we mean by divide and conquer. You divide it up into smaller problems such as get the bread, then get the peanut butter, then get jelly, etc. It also makes it easier to find bugs. So if you know, for example, some of the bugs we had in Batman Arkham Origins were like bugs where, for example, we had this one nasty bug where in a particular cinematic, once in a while Batman just would not talk. He was supposed to be talking, but he just would not start the queue. The audio queue wouldn't start. So we searched for that bug forever. Finally, we found it by putting it in some sort of a get method. Well, in this case, it was a function because it was in C++, but we basically put in a get method of that was getting a string from the parser, and that was supposed to be translated into and the correct dialog found. And that made it pretty easy to find that bug, was the fact that we used methods. So we're going to talk today about how to make a method, even how to use a method with the same name. That's what we call overloading. And we'll also talk about how do you actually use a method in general. What we call this is calling a method. So when someone says, oh, all you need to do is call this method, what they really mean is you just have to use that particular method. Here's a way to create a method. In this case, we've seen one already. So we've seen main is a method. It's a method with a special property. It runs first, and it's got a static for now. I don't want you to worry too much about static. But main is a method within the class program that can run. We'll be getting to classes in a little bit, but for now, just think of them as an example of a specific type, a custom-made type. Methods always belong to classes. And on the next slide, we can see how we can add a method to an already existing class. Here is an example of using a method. In this case, the method is called count to 10, and I'm actually going to take this method and paste it into Xamarin for us. So to speed things up, I'm just going to do a quick paste. I'm going to go back to our recently viewed solution that we called October 6 tests. I'm just going to paste this guy right in here. So since we've already got a main method, Now we've got this method called count to 10 on top of it, which is also defined as a static. And inside of it, it has a for loop that basically just counts to 10. So to demonstrate the power here, I'm going to go over this in the slides quick, but I just want to show you if I now call this function, count to 10, call it for main. In this case, it's going to call it twice, because I'm going to write it twice. So this line transfers control to this function, then it finishes, and it goes back to this line, and then it calls it again. So for example, what this will do so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then all over again. Now if I was actually to trace through that, say I put a breakpoint on the very last line of main right here. Actually, no, I want it right here. Do that over. So I'm going to set a breakpoint as soon as the count to 10 method is called. I'm going to see it stop right here. Now, if I hit, instead of hitting F10, I hit step into, which is F11, it immediately jumps to this function, or this method rather. And I can then step into this method. Each time it writes out, it's going to go on my for loop. Now if I go through to the end and do a step out, and it goes back to main. See, it's going back to main, and now it goes back into the next count to 10 function. So that's a quick demonstration of the power of functions, or methods rather. You can call a method from anywhere in your code, and you can have it do anything you want. So static, as I said, we need static. Void is the return type. We're going to get into return types in a little bit. We could have put inside of these parameters, we could have put something. We could have passed something into as a parameter, and that would have carried through into this method, but we did not do so, which is why we put void. The rest of this method to you should look very familiar. It's just a for loop that goes from 1 through 10 and prints out each time. And then we end up calling this from main. In fact, I called it twice. Here's another example. And this shows you exactly what's going on, because main happens, and then right line, I am about to go into a method, do something awesome, and then inside of do something awesome, I'm inside of method awesome. And then console right line says I am back from this method. So if you were to run this, you'd get, I'm about to go into a method, I'm inside of a method, awesome, I'm back from the method. Now, we can easily have return values. So here we show an example of a return value from float get random number, and this gives us the float 4.385f. That is a floating point valued number with value 4.385. If we were to do something weird to count to 10, like for example return a float, I don't know why you would in a count to 10, but why not? And then we were to return 2.875f, we could assign that to something. F equals float G equals, now F and G are both going to equal 2.875 F. I'm going to write out what the value of F is. And you get the idea. So I'm going to just run this quick. And we see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 has been written. And then you see that F is about to be written. F is 2.875, just as we expected. And then we close our program. So that is an example of a return value from a method. Here's a more complex example. Let's say in a game we might need to get the player number from a variety of places in the menuing system. Maybe from where you're configuring your armor, from where you're configuring your loadout, where your inventory is read, where your health is read. I don't know. There's many places you'd want to have that in the HUD and menu system. So we might want a method called getNumberFromUser. So basically, this is saying enter a number between 1 and 10, get the user's response. While it's less than 1 or it's greater than 10, then keep getting it so we've got a valid one, and then eventually return the user number. And as we said, this is how you can simply do that. You can say int user's number equals getNumberFromUser. And remember, you need to put that return statement at the end of your method. So in our case, we have return 2.875f at the end of the count to 10 method. And if you don't need to return anything, you can use void. Now, another way to do this is to say count and just have it input the number that it should count up to. So the 10 in this case would go into this method, and then it would count up to that number that was input in. So let's make that change. Let's say count is the new name of our method. I'm going to call it count up. Up 10. I'm going to call this count up. Now I need to pass in this as an integer. I'm going to call it count value. And now I need to make this change here. I need to call this count value. And this should do the trick. Oops, little typo here. So count it up to 10, as you can see here, which is the expected results. So now we can call it in any way we want. That calls it with 10. But what if we wanted to change this behavior? Count up to 5 and then count up to 15. One, 2, 3, or 5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So that does exactly what we expected it to. Now you can also pass in multiple parameters. Here's an example of passing in a and b to a multiply method. So multiply takes int a, and it also takes int b. We separate these by commas. We can also do what we call overloading. We can have the same named function, multiply here, and it's called multiply here. This one takes 2 parameters, int a, comma, int b. This one takes 3, int a, comma, int b, comma, int c, and it returns the product of all of those. So now if you think back to one of the first things we did, the console.writeLine hello world, it should be clear now to you that the writeLine is a method on a class called console. And writeLine can be called with anything we want, anything that's a string, that is. Another example of a method is convert to int. So toInt is the method on the class named convert. 42 is the thing that's being converted. Lastly, I just wanted to let you know that C# uses XML to make its documentation. It actually nicely formats HTML pages to documentation for you, but you have to follow this certain procedure. So at the top of the method, you put summary, and then you say what the summary is. Takes two numbers and multiplies them together, returning the result. Then you end summary, and you say param name equals A. That's the first number to multiply. Param name equals B is the second number. And then finally, what does it return? So ideally, you would put this on each of your methods, and then you could use that for documentation purposes.